Commander Jake Morrison stood perfectly still on the bridge of the GSS Valiant as he watched the main display screen with growing unease. The ship had been traveling for 3 weeks through deep space to reach this location. This sector of the galaxy had been marked as forbidden for 3,000 years. Every civilization in the known galaxy had laws preventing anyone from approaching this region. Ancient warnings written in dozens of dead languages all carried the same message. Do not approach the sealed world. Do not attempt contact. Do not ask questions about what lies beyond the barrier. The Galactic Council had finally decided to send an expedition after their long-range sensors detected something unusual. The energy readings from within the quarantine zone had changed. Something was happening to the barrier that had held for 3 millennia. Jake's crew consisted of 35 people from various species across the galaxy. They had scientists, soldiers, engineers, and diplomats. Among them was Dr. Lisa Bennett, a human woman whose ancestors had left Earth 15,000 years ago. Her people had been living on colony worlds for so long that they barely remembered their homeworld. But Lisa had studied everything she could find about Earth. She had become obsessed with learning about the birthplace of humanity. Lieutenant Chris, Palmer called out from the navigation console in a voice that carried a hint of nervousness. Commander, we are detecting the barrier now. It's showing up on all our sensors. The energy signature is unlike anything in our database. I've never seen readings like this before. Lisa moved quickly to the main viewport and pressed her hand against the transparent material. Her eyes went wide as she saw what lay ahead. The barrier appeared as a massive wall of violet energy that stretched across space in all directions. It surrounded an entire solar system. At the center of that system was a yellow star. Orbiting that star at just the right distance was a small blue and green planet, Earth, the birthplace of all humanity. The world that had been locked away from the rest of the galaxy for reasons no one fully understood. Jake felt a chill run down his spine as he looked at the barrier. The legends were true. The ancient Forerunner Alliance had actually sealed away an entire planet. He had read the reports and studied the limited historical records. The Forerunners had been a coalition of the most powerful civilizations in the galaxy. They had possessed technology far beyond what modern species could create, and they had used that technology to imprison one small world. The resources required for such an undertaking must have been enormous. The question that haunted Jake was simple. What threat could have been so terrible that the Forerunners felt they had no choice but to seal Earth away forever? Begin full scanning protocols, he ordered in a calm voice that did not reveal his inner tension. I want detailed readings on that barrier. Composition, energy output, structural integrity, everything. We need to understand what we're dealing with before we attempt any kind of contact. The crew moved efficiently to follow his orders. Sensors extended from the hull of the Valiant. Complex instruments began measuring and analyzing the barrier from a safe distance. Jake watched the data flow across multiple screens. The barrier was incredibly powerful. It was generating enough energy to maintain itself across billions of cubic kilometers of space. The technology involved was far beyond anything the current galactic civilizations could produce. Lisa pulled up historical records on her personal console. She read through files that she had practically memorized over the years. Humanity had spread to the stars in the ancient era. They had colonized hundreds of worlds across dozens of sectors. Humans had been explorers and traders and builders. They had been a rising power in the galaxy. But 15,000 years ago, something had happened on Earth. The colony worlds lost all contact with their homeworld. Communication simply stopped. The colonies tried to send ships back to investigate, but none of them ever returned. Then came the decree from the Forerunner Alliance. Earth was to be sealed away. Any attempt to reach the planet would be met with immediate and overwhelming force. The Forerunners had enforced this decree with brutal efficiency. Several human colony fleets had tried to fight their way through. They had all been destroyed. Commander, you need to see this right now. Lieutenant Amy Chen spoke urgently from the science station. Her face had gone pale as she stared at her instruments. The barrier is failing. I'm detecting systematic degradation across multiple points. At the current rate of decay, the barrier will collapse completely within 6 months. Jake felt his blood turn to ice. 6 months. In 6 months, whatever had been locked away behind that barrier would be free. The galaxy had 3,000 years to prepare for this possibility, but no one had seriously believed it would happen. The Forerunner technology had seemed eternal, unbreakable, but apparently even the greatest achievements of the ancient civilizations had a limit. Can we reinforce it, he asked, though he already suspected the answer. Amy shook her head quickly. No, sir. We don't understand the technology well enough. Even if we did, the energy requirements would be beyond our capability. The Forerunners used power sources we can't duplicate. This barrier was always going to fail eventually. It's just happening now. Jake turned to his communications officer. Send an immediate priority message to the Galactic Council. Encrypt it with the highest level protocols. Tell them the barrier is failing and we need new orders. As the message was transmitted, Jake looked back at the sealed world. Earth looked so peaceful from this distance, so harmless, just a blue planet orbiting a yellow star. But the Forerunners had not sealed away a planet because it was harmless. They had imprisoned an entire world because they feared what existed there. Now that prison was breaking down. In 6 months, the galaxy would discover what the Forerunners had been afraid of. The bridge was silent as everyone absorbed the implications. Finally, Chris spoke in a quiet voice. What do you think is down there, sir? What could be so dangerous that the most powerful civilizations in galactic history felt they had no choice but to lock it away forever? Jake did not have an answer. None of them did. But they were about to find out. The Valiant held position at a safe distance from the barrier as they waited for the Council's response. Jake knew the politicians would panic. They would argue and debate. Some would want to reinforce the barrier at any cost. Others would want to flee as far away as possible. But a few would recognize the truth. The barrier was falling whether they liked it or not. The only real question was whether they would face whatever was behind it, prepared or blind. Lisa stood at the viewport for a long time, staring at Earth. Somewhere down there on that sealed world were billions of humans. Her distant cousins, people who had been cut off from the rest of humanity for 3,000 years. What had happened to them in all that time? How had they survived? And most importantly, what had they become? The response from the Galactic Council arrived faster than Jake had expected. The message came through encrypted channels, and the content made the situation clear. The Council was divided. Half of the member civilizations wanted to pour resources into reinforcing the barrier. They wanted to keep Earth sealed away no matter what the cost. The other half argued that such an effort would be futile and wastefully expensive. They believed the galaxy needed to know what existed behind the barrier before it collapsed completely. Jake's mission parameters had changed. He was now authorized to make direct contact with Earth and assess the level of threat the planet posed to galactic security. Kate Sullivan stood in the engineering bay running calculations on her console. She was the chief engineer of the Valiant and one of the brightest minds Jake had ever worked with. For 2 weeks she had been studying the barrier, trying to find a way through. The energy wall was incredibly complex. It existed partially in normal space and partially in dimensions that human science barely understood. But Kate had finally found something promising. There were weak points in the barrier where the energy field fluctuated slightly. If she could generate the exact right harmonic frequency, she might be able to create a temporary opening. It would be small and it would only last for a few minutes, but it would be enough to send a probe through. Jake stood beside her as she made the final adjustments to the probe. The device was loaded with every sensor the Valiant possessed. Cameras, radiation detectors, atmospheric analyzers, communication equipment, everything they might need to gather information about Earth. Are you certain this will work? Jake asked quietly. Kate nodded without looking up from her work. About 70% certain. The math checks out, but we've never tried to breach Forerunner technology before. There could be defensive systems we don't know about. The barrier might react to our intrusion in unpredictable ways. But if we want answers, this is our best option. Jake made his decision. Do it. Launch the probe as soon as you have an opening. Kate's fingers moved across her console with practiced precision. She had connected the probe to a specialized emitter that would generate the harmonic frequency. The emitter began to pulse with energy. On the main display screen, they could see the barrier responding. A small section of the violet energy field began to ripple and distort. Then suddenly there was a gap. A circular opening barely 2 meters across appeared in the barrier. Probe away, Kate announced as she activated the launch sequence. The small device shot forward through the opening and disappeared into the space beyond. The gap in the barrier held for exactly 4 minutes and 37 seconds before it collapsed. But that was enough. The probe was through and data was already streaming back to the Valiant. Jake rushed back to the bridge with Kate close behind him. The entire crew had gathered around the main display screens. Amy was coordinating the incoming data and organizing it into coherent categories. The first images from the probe appeared and everyone fell silent. Earth was beautiful. The planet's surface showed vast oceans of deep blue water, continents covered in green vegetation. White clouds swirled through the atmosphere in complex patterns. But as the probe descended closer, the crew began to see signs of civilization. Cities covered large portions of the continents. These were not the massive, sprawling metropolises common on other advanced worlds. Instead, they seemed to blend with the natural environment. Buildings incorporated living plants and flowing water. Architecture merged with landscape in ways that seemed both deliberate and organic. "The population reading is impossible," Amy said as she stared at her instruments in disbelief. "I'm showing 17 billion humans on the surface. There are also orbital habitats around the planet, stations on the moon, colonies on several other bodies in the solar system. The total human population in this system is approximately 50 billion people." Lisa leaned forward with her mouth hanging open. "How is that possible? They've been cut off from all galactic trade and technology for 3,000 years. They should have collapsed or at least stagnated. How did they achieve this level of development in isolation?" No one had an answer. The probe continued its programmed descent through Earth's atmosphere. It transmitted images of transportation networks that crisscrossed the continents, agricultural regions that produced food with remarkable efficiency, industrial centers that manufactured goods, educational institutions, medical facilities. Everything a thriving civilization needed. "I'm picking up massive energy signatures," Chris reported from his station. "They're coming from installations all over the planet. Military bases, weapons platforms, defense networks. Commander, Earth is armed like a fortress world preparing for invasion." Jake felt unease growing in his chest. A civilization that had been sealed away for 3 millennia had turned itself into an armed camp. What did that say about their mindset? What did they think was going to happen when the barrier fell? The probe focused its cameras on a large facility in the North American continent. The complex covered several square kilometers and appeared to be a military training center. Thousands of humans moved through the facility in organized groups. They wore uniforms and carried themselves with military discipline. But something about them was wrong. They moved too fast. Their reflexes were too sharp. Their coordination was too perfect. "Zoom in on that training field," Jake ordered with growing concern in his voice. The probe's cameras focused on a particular section of the facility. A training exercise was in progress. Jake watched as a young man faced off against 3 opponents simultaneously. The man's name tag identified him as Ryan Carter. He moved like lightning. His body seemed to blur as he struck out with his fists. Each blow landed with tremendous force. One of his opponents was thrown backward and hit a reinforcement wall hard enough to leave a dent in the metal. Ryan's eyes were glowing with a faint blue light that seemed to come from within. "Those are genetic modifications," Lisa whispered in shock. "They've been enhancing themselves. Those aren't baseline humans anymore." Before anyone could respond, every screen on the bridge suddenly went dark. Red warning lights flashed throughout the ship. An incoming transmission was overriding all of their systems with raw force. Jake had never seen anything punch through their security protocols so easily. Then the screens came back on and a woman's face appeared. She was perhaps 50 years old with short gray hair and steel-colored eyes. Her expression was completely neutral, showing no emotion at all. She wore a military uniform with rank insignia that Jake didn't recognize. A nameplate on her chest identified her as General Helen Pierce, Commander of Earth Defense Forces. Unknown vessel, her voice was cold and precise. "This is Earth. We detected your probe the moment it entered our space. You have violated our sovereign territory. State your intentions immediately or we will be forced to consider your actions as hostile." Jake straightened and tried to project calm authority. "General Pierce, I am Commander Jake Morrison of the Galactic Council exploration vessel Valiant. We mean no harm to Earth or its people. We have come to establish contact and to understand the historical circumstances that led to your world being sealed away from the galaxy." Helen's expression didn't change at all. Her eyes remained fixed on Jake with an intensity that made him uncomfortable. "The galaxy sealed us away because they were afraid of what we would become. Their fear was justified. We have become exactly what they feared. You have 12 hours to leave this sector. If your vessel remains after that time, we will interpret your presence as an act of war and respond accordingly. Wait, Jake said quickly. We need to talk. The barrier is failing. In 6 months, it will collapse completely. The galaxy needs to understand what happened here. We need to find a way forward that doesn't end in conflict. The galaxy had 3,000 years to seek understanding. Helen replied in the same emotionless voice. They chose fear and imprisonment instead. We have prepared for the day when our prison fails. We are ready for whatever comes next. 12 hours, Commander. Not 1 minute more. The transmission ended abruptly. The screens returned to normal. The bridge was completely silent as everyone tried to process what had just happened. Earth was not only aware of them, but had been tracking their probe from the moment it entered the system. The planet possessed technology sophisticated enough to override the Valiant's security. And most concerning of all, they were expecting conflict. They had spent 3,000 years preparing for war with the galaxy that had sealed them away. Jake looked at his crew and saw fear on many faces. He couldn't blame them. They had just made first contact with a civilization that viewed them as potential enemies, a civilization that had somehow turned itself into something more than human during its long isolation. Get me a direct channel to the Galactic Council, Jake ordered. They need to know what we're dealing with, and someone find out everything you can about genetic enhancement technology. I want to know what Earth has done to itself. Jake transmitted everything they had discovered directly to the Galactic Council, using the fastest communication channels available. The images of enhanced humans training with superhuman abilities, the recordings of General Pierce's cold warning, the data showing Earth's massive population and military infrastructure. He included his own assessment that Earth represented a civilization that had spent 3,000 years preparing for the moment when their prison would fail. Then he waited for the Council's response. It came within hours. High Chancellor Vorin appeared on the main screen. He was a member of the Talari race, one of the oldest species in the galaxy. His people had been part of the ancient Forerunner Alliance. Vorin looked old and tired. His translated voice carried what sounded like genuine fear. Commander Morrison, you must leave that sector immediately. Do not attempt further contact with Earth. The sealing of that world was the Forerunners' greatest achievement and their deepest shame. What I am about to tell you has been kept secret for 3,000 years. The truth was meant to die with my generation. But if the barrier is truly failing, then the galaxy must know what we face. The crew gathered closer to the screens as Vorin began transmitting historical records. Jake watched as holographic images filled the bridge. The records showed the galaxy as it had existed 15,000 years ago. Hundreds of civilizations spread across thousands of worlds, trade routes connecting distant sectors, cultural exchanges and diplomatic agreements. A galaxy that was peaceful and prosperous. Then came the Xel'Nath. They arrived from dark space, from regions beyond the edge of the known galaxy. The Xel'Nath were beings of pure energy that could manipulate reality itself. They could bend the laws of physics, destroy stars with a thought, consume entire planets to fuel their existence. The Forerunner Alliance threw everything they had at the invaders. Fleets of warships, weapons that could crack worlds, ancient technologies that had been stored away for emergencies. Nothing worked. The Xel'Nath swept through the galaxy like a wave of destruction. Entire civilizations vanished in days. Billions died. The galaxy stood on the edge of total annihilation. Humanity was a young species then, Vorin continued. They had only recently developed faster than light travel. They controlled perhaps 200 worlds scattered across a small region of space. But humans had one quality that set them apart. They were survivors. When faced with impossible odds, they refused to give up. They looked for solutions that others would never consider. The holographic records showed human fleets fighting desperate battles against the Xel'Nath. Jake watched human soldiers dying by the thousands as they tried to slow the invasion. Then the records showed something that made his blood run cold. A human delegation traveling to a region of space that no other species dared to enter. They were seeking something called the Void Chorus. The Void Chorus is an intelligence that exists outside normal reality, Vorin explained with obvious discomfort. It lives in the spaces between dimensions, in the gaps where the universe folds back on itself. The Forerunners knew of its existence, but we had always avoided contact. The Void Chorus was alien in ways that even the Xel'Nath were not. It did not think like living beings. It did not want the things that organic life desired. But humanity was desperate. They made contact with the Void Chorus and they negotiated a bargain. Jake felt sick as he watched the records. He could see human representatives standing before something that his eyes could not properly focus on. An entity that seemed to exist in multiple dimensions simultaneously. The negotiation was conducted through methods that made no sense to ordinary minds. No one knows what humanity offered in exchange, Vorin said quietly. The records from that time are incomplete or deliberately destroyed. But the result was clear. Human soldiers began to change. Their genetic code was rewritten by forces that should not exist in our universe. They developed abilities that violated every known law of physics and biology, strength that could tear apart steel, speed that allowed them to move faster than sensors could track, durability that let them survive in hard vacuum, the ability to adapt to any environment or threat they encountered. The records showed enhanced human forces driving back the Xel'Nath in battles that defied belief. Jake watched soldiers moving through enemy lines like unstoppable forces of nature. He saw humans surviving weapons that should have vaporized them. He witnessed abilities that seemed more like magic than science. Within a year, the Xel'Nath invasion had been stopped. Within 2 years, the invaders had been driven back to the edge of the galaxy. Humanity had saved everyone. But then came the problem, Vorin continued. Human leaders began making demands. They wanted territory as payment for their sacrifice. They wanted resources to rebuild their devastated worlds. They wanted a seat on the Forerunner Council with equal authority to species that had existed for millions of years. When the Council hesitated, human fleets moved to take what they felt they were owed by force. Jake watched as tensions escalated. Human ships seized control of resource-rich systems. Human colonies expanded aggressively into territories claimed by other species. Diplomatic meetings turned into shouting matches. The galaxy that humanity had saved was now afraid of what humanity had become. The enhanced humans were too powerful, too aggressive, too willing to use force to get what they wanted. The Forerunners realized they had created a monster, Vorin said, with something that sounded like regret. Earth's enhanced humans could adapt to any weapon used against them. They could overcome any defense. Given enough time, they would conquer the entire galaxy. But direct military confrontation would result in losses too terrible to contemplate. So the Forerunners made their own bargain with the Void Chorus. The holographic record showed Forerunner leaders standing before the same impossible entity that humanity had contacted. Jake watched as they negotiated a different deal. Seal Earth away forever. Trap the entire planet and its solar system behind an impenetrable barrier. Keep humanity contained but alive. The price for this service was steep beyond comprehension. 3 entire Forerunner species ceased to exist, Vorin said, and his voice cracked with emotion. The Dralvan, the Morphics, and the Quentar. Billions upon billions of beings. Their entire existence was consumed to power the barrier. Their matter, their energy, their very souls were sacrificed to fuel the seal. The Forerunners committed genocide against their own member species to imprison humanity. The records showed the moment when the barrier activated. Jake watched as violet energy spread across space to surround Earth's solar system. He saw human ships trying desperately to escape. He witnessed the deaths of every human who was outside the barrier when it sealed. Colony ships full of families, research stations with scientists, diplomatic vessels carrying ambassadors. 300 million humans died instantly when the barrier closed. Earth attempted to break through for decades, Vorin continued. They threw everything they had at the barrier. But Forerunner technology powered by the sacrifice of entire species was too strong. Eventually, Earth stopped trying. They turned inward. For 3,000 years they have been alone, isolated, left, to evolve and adapt without any outside contact or influence. Vorin's image leaned forward and his eyes locked onto Jake's. Do you understand what this means, Commander? Earth has had 3,000 years of isolation, 1,500 generations of enhanced humans breeding and adapting without limits. We have no idea what they have become. The humans we sealed away could survive in vacuum and punch through steel. What can their descendants do after millennia of directed evolution? What have they turned themselves into? The transmission paused as Vorin seemed to gather his strength. The Forerunners are gone now. Their great civilizations collapsed under the weight of their own guilt. We who remain are the inheritors of their sins. We live in a galaxy built on genocide and fear, and now the barrier is failing. The prison sentence is ending. Earth is about to rejoin a galaxy that murdered billions of humans and sealed away their homeworld. Vorin's expression became grave. If Earth breaks free with 3,000 years of resentment and anger, They will finish what they started. They will conquer the galaxy that imprisoned them. And after 1,500 generations of enhancement and adaptation, nothing we possess can stop them. Commander Morrison, you must leave immediately. Warn every world you can reach. Tell them to prepare for war. Tell them that humanity's judgment day is coming. The transmission ended, leaving the bridge in shocked silence. Jake looked at his crew and saw the fear in their eyes. Lisa stood frozen at her console with tears running down her face. She had just learned that her ancestors had been sealed away by an act of genocide, that the galaxy she lived in was built on the graves of billions of humans who had died for trying to survive. Jake made a decision that he knew would define the rest of his life. Open a channel to Earth, he ordered. I want to speak with General Pierce again. We're not running. We're going to hear their side of this story. General Pierce responded to Jake's request for contact within minutes. Her message was brief and direct. Permission to approach was granted, but under strict conditions. The Valiant would dock at Luna Station, the human military outpost built into Earth's moon. A delegation of no more than 3 people could visit Earth itself. They would be unarmed and under constant supervision at all times. Any deviation from approved protocols would result in immediate detention or worse. Jake chose his delegation carefully. He would go himself, of course. Lisa insisted on coming because this was her ancestral homeworld, and she deserved to see it. Amy volunteered because her training in cultural studies might help them understand what Earth had become. The 3 of them boarded a small shuttle and began the journey from the Valiant to Luna Station. The approach to the moon was tense. The lunar surface was covered with defensive installations. Weapons platforms tracked their shuttle from the moment they entered range. Energy readings showed that each platform carried enough firepower to destroy a capital ship. Jake counted at least 200 platforms visible from his position. There were probably many more hidden beneath the surface or in orbit. They docked at a military port carved deep into the lunar rock. When the airlock opened, they were met by an escort of 6 human soldiers wearing powered armor. The armor made each soldier look like a walking tank. Heavy plates of advanced alloy covered every part of their bodies. Weapon systems were built into the arms and shoulders. The faceplates were dark and reflective, hiding the faces beneath. Their guide stepped forward and removed his helmet. He was a young man with dark hair and an easy smile that seemed odd, given the obvious military tension. His uniform identified him as Captain Eric Stone. "Welcome to Luna Station," he said in a friendly voice. "I apologize for the heavy security, but we've learned to be careful over the years. Please follow me and I'll give you a brief tour before we head down to Earth." Eric led them through corridors carved from solid rock. The station was enormous. They passed training facilities where soldiers practiced in simulated combat. Engineering bays where technicians maintained equipment. Residential sections where off-duty personnel relaxed. Research laboratories where scientists worked on projects that Jake couldn't begin to understand from brief glances. Luna Station houses 50,000 military personnel, Eric explained as they walked. "We coordinate planetary defense from here. We also conduct research and training. Everything you see was built by us from scratch after the sealing. We had no outside help, no imported materials. We did it all ourselves." Amy looked at the advanced technology surrounding them with obvious amazement. "Your capabilities are remarkable, Captain. How did you achieve this level of development in isolation?" Eric's smile faded slightly. "Necessity. When you know that the entire galaxy wants you dead, you learn to be resourceful. We couldn't rely on anyone but ourselves, so we pushed our limits. We enhanced our minds to think faster and more creatively. We enhanced our bodies to work longer without rest. We became what we needed to be to survive." They reached an elevator that descended deep into the moon's interior. Eric explained that they would take an underground transit system to Earth. The tunnel had been carved through hundreds of thousands of kilometers of rock and space. Gravity generators and force fields kept the passage stable and safe. The transit car moved at incredible speed. Within 20 minutes, they emerged on Earth's surface in a facility hidden beneath a mountain range. General Pierce was waiting for them in a large chamber carved from stone. She looked exactly as she had in the transmission. Cold eyes, military bearing, an expression that revealed nothing. "Welcome to Earth, Commander Morrison," she said without warmth. "You wanted to hear our side of the story? Come with me and I'll show you the truth that the galaxy tried to bury." She led them through passages that opened into a massive memorial hall. The wall stretched up hundreds of meters into darkness. Every surface was covered with names. Millions upon millions of names. Each one glowed softly with a gentle light. "These are the dead," Helen said quietly. "Every human who was in space when the Forerunners activated the barrier. The dimensional shockwave killed them all instantly. 300 million people. Scientists on research missions. Families traveling to new colonies. Children who had never even seen Earth. Diplomats trying to negotiate peace. Merchants conducting trade. All of them murdered in an instant without warning or trial." Lisa's hand went to her mouth as tears filled her eyes. She moved closer to the wall and read names written in scripts she recognized from ancient records. Among them were names that matched her own family histories. Her ancestors, people who had died 3,000 years ago simply because they were in the wrong place when the galaxy decided to seal away their homeworld. "The records you were shown claimed Earth was preparing for galactic conquest," Helen continued. "Those records are lies. Propaganda created to justify genocide. Yes, we were aggressive after defeating the Xel'Nath. Yes, we demanded territory and resources as payment for saving the galaxy. We were arrogant and angry and probably too forceful in our negotiations. But we were not planning to exterminate other species. We were not building weapons of mass destruction. We simply wanted what we felt we had earned through sacrifice." She led them deeper into the mountain complex to a massive archive chamber. Holographic projectors filled the space with images from Earth's own historical records. Jake watched as humanity celebrated their victory over the Xel'Nath. He saw parades and ceremonies honoring fallen soldiers. He witnessed the grief of a species that had lost billions of people in the war. Then came the negotiations with the Forerunner Council. The records showed human diplomats making demands. They wanted systems to resettle their war refugees. They wanted access to trade routes. They wanted a voice in galactic affairs equal to older species. The tone was aggressive. The threats were real. But Jake could also see the fear beneath the bluster. Humanity had sacrificed everything to save the galaxy, and they were terrified of being cast aside as soon as they were no longer needed. Then the records showed something that made Jake's stomach twist. Forerunner fleets moving into position around Earth's solar system. Military buildup happening in secret. Weapons platforms being positioned. All of this occurring while human diplomats were still negotiating in good faith. The Forerunners had been planning the sealing for months before they activated it. They had never intended to find a peaceful solution. "The barrier activated without warning," Helen said, and her voice carried the weight of 3,000 years of anger. No declaration of war, no final chance for diplomacy. They simply turned on the barrier and murdered everyone outside it. 300 million humans died while your precious Forerunners watched. Then they spent 3,000 years telling lies about how necessary it all was. Jake watched the moment when Earth realized what had happened. The panic, the fury, the desperate attempts to break through the barrier, the riots and protests, the grief of billions of people who had lost friends and family. Earth had tried everything to escape. They threw their entire military at the barrier. They attempted to negotiate with the Void Chorus for help. Nothing worked. Eventually they accepted that they were trapped. "For 3,000 years we have been alone," Helen said. "We had to adapt or die. The Void Chorus's gift allowed us to survive. Every child born on Earth carries enhanced genetics. We can adapt to any environment. We can overcome any challenge. We can become whatever we need to be. We had to develop these abilities because we knew that someday the barrier would fail. And when it did, we knew the galaxy would come for us again." She turned to face them directly. "So here is Earth's truth, Commander. We are not your enemy unless you make us one. We want to rejoin the galaxy. We want to reclaim our place among the stars. We want to trade and share knowledge and live in peace with other species. But we will never again be victims. If the Council tries to seal us away again or tries to destroy Earth, we will fight. And after 3,000 years of preparation, we will win." Jake met her cold gaze. "What did you offer the Void Chorus? What was the price for your survival?" Helen's expression softened very slightly. "Come with me and I'll show you the one thing we've never told anyone outside Earth, the secret that explains everything about what we've become." She led them to a transport vehicle that took them across the continent to another facility. This one was built on the surface near the ruins of an ancient city. At the center of the complex was a structure that seemed to bend light around itself. Jake's eyes couldn't quite focus on it properly. It existed in their dimension, but also in others simultaneously. "The Void Chorus doesn't want money or resources or territory," Helen explained. It wants experience. It wants to feel existence in our dimension. The price for our enhancement was simple. Every human who dies, their consciousness passes through that gate to the chorus. Everything they experienced, everything they learned, everything they felt, all of it goes to feed an entity that exists outside normal reality. Lisa gasped in shock. You sold your souls. Helen shook her head. We ensured our survival, and the chorus has kept its bargain. Every generation of humans born on Earth is stronger and more capable than the last. We can do things that should be impossible. Watch. Helen led them to an observation platform overlooking a massive training complex. Below them, hundreds of humans were demonstrating abilities that made Jake question everything he knew about biology and physics. A woman named Claire Martinez walked straight through a solid concrete wall as if it didn't exist. Her body seemed to shift out of phase with normal matter for just a moment. On the other side, she became solid again and continued walking without breaking stride. A man named Tony Ross stood in a sealed chamber that had been evacuated of all air. Through the transparent walls, Jake could see him breathing normally in hard vacuum. His skin had adapted to create its own protective layer. His lungs were processing trace particles that shouldn't have provided enough oxygen to sustain life. He survived for 10 minutes in conditions that would kill any normal human in seconds. A teenage boy named Danny Foster stood in the center of an open field. He raised his hands and the ground around him began to ripple. Gravity itself was bending to his will. A training vehicle weighing several tons lifted slowly into the air. Danny held it suspended for nearly a minute before gently setting it back down. He looked tired from the effort, but otherwise unharmed. These are just basic examples, Helen said calmly. Every human on Earth has the potential for enhancement. The abilities manifest when needed. When survival demands it, we don't choose what we become. Our genetics respond to challenges and adapt accordingly. A person working in deep ocean research might develop the ability to withstand extreme pressure. Someone exploring volcanic regions might become resistant to heat. A soldier facing enemy weapons might develop armor like skin or accelerated healing. Amy was frantically taking notes on her portable device. This is incredible. The applications for medicine alone could revolutionize healthcare across the galaxy. The scientific understanding required to achieve this is beyond anything current galactic civilization possesses. Helen nodded. We've had 3,000 years with nothing to do but study ourselves. We understand human genetics better than any species understands their own biology. We can guide the enhancement process to some degree, not control it but influence it. Parents can prepare their children for specific environments or challenges. Military personnel can train to develop combat-relevant abilities, but the core adaptation is always involuntary. The Void Chorus's gift responds to genuine need, not simple desire. Jake watched a group of children playing in a park below. They looked normal, happy and innocent, but he knew that each of them carried the potential to become something far beyond baseline human. How do you maintain a society when everyone has such power, he asked. What prevents conflict when any individual could potentially become unstoppable? Culture and law, Helen replied. We've built our entire civilization around the understanding that power must be balanced with responsibility. Enhancement is a gift but also a burden. Those who develop Dange Rouse abilities receive immediate training and support. We have therapists who help people adjust to their changes. We have facilities where enhanced individuals can practice control in safe environments. And we have laws with severe penalties for misuse of abilities. She gestured to the training complex. This isn't just military preparation, Commander. This is social infrastructure. Every enhanced human in our society learns control here. They learn limits. They learn when to use their abilities and when to hold back. We've had 3,000 years to perfect this system. Lisa spoke for the first time since entering the complex. What about the children? Do they know what will happen to them when they die? Do they understand the bargain their ancestors made? Helen's expression became somber. Every child is taught the truth when they reach age 12. We don't hide it. We don't pretend it's something other than what it is. When we die, our consciousness passes to the Void Chorus. What happens after that, we don't know. We like to think some part of us continues in some form. But we're honest about the uncertainty. It's the price we pay for survival. Jake thought about the implications. An entire civilization living with the knowledge that their afterlife belonged to an alien entity. How do people cope with that? How do they find meaning? The same way any species finds meaning, Helen answered. We live, we love, We create, we build things that outlast us. We raise children and teach them to be better than we were. The bargain with the Void Chorus doesn't change the fundamentals of existence. It just adds one more certainty to the list of certainties we all face. She led them to a conference room where holographic displays showed Earth's plans for the future. Trade agreements ready to be proposed to galactic civilizations. Cultural exchange programs designed to rebuild connections with colony worlds. Technology sharing initiatives that would benefit everyone. Scientific research partnerships. Educational collaborations. Detailed proposals for peaceful reintegration into galactic society. This is what we want, Jake. Not war. Not revenge. Not conquest. We want to come home to the galaxy. We want to rejoin the community of civilized species. We're offering our knowledge freely. Our enhanced genetics could help cure diseases. Our adaptation research could help colonists survive harsh worlds. Our military technology could defend against future threats like the Xelnoth. We have so much to offer. Jake studied the proposals carefully. They were generous. Almost too generous. What do you want in return? He asked suspiciously. Helen smiled for the first time since they had met. Recognition. Acceptance. We want the galaxy to acknowledge that the ceiling was wrong. We want an apology for the 300 million humans who were murdered. We want restitution for 3,000 years of imprisonment. Not as money or territory, but as a promise. A promise that the galaxy will never again try to seal away a species out of fear. A promise that what happened to us will never happen to anyone else. She pulled up more displays showing Earth's defensive capabilities. The weapons platforms. The enhanced soldiers. The technologies developed in isolation. We have the power to conquer the galaxy if we wanted to. After 3,000 years of preparation, we could probably succeed. But that's not who we are. We're not monsters. We're humans who want to live in peace. The military strength you see isn't for invasion. It's insurance. A guarantee that no one will ever imprison us again. Jake made his decision. I'll deliver your message to the Council. I'll tell them everything I've seen and learned. I'll recommend that they accept Earth's offer of peaceful reintegration. But General, you need to understand something. The galaxy is terrified. Fear makes civilizations do terrible things. Even with my recommendation, there's a real possibility they'll choose war. Helen's expression hardened. Then we'll fight. Not because we want to, but because we must. And Commander, when we fight, we don't lose. That's what 3,000 years of forced evolution created. A species that cannot be defeated. The Forerunners made us into the perfect survivors. If the galaxy forces our hand, they'll discover exactly what that means. As they prepared to leave, Eric approached them with a small boy in tow. The child couldn't have been more than 8 years old. He had bright, curious eyes and wore casual clothes. His name tag read Alex Hughes. Excuse me, the boy said politely. Are you really from the stars? My teacher says there are thousands of worlds out there with people on them. Jake knelt down to the boy's level and felt his heart break a little. Yes, Alex, there are thousands of worlds, maybe tens of thousands. All of them full of people living their lives. Alex's eyes went wide with wonder. Will they let us visit? When the barrier falls, will we get to see the other worlds? I want to meet aliens. I want to see different planets. I want to learn about other civilizations. Jake looked at the innocent hope in the child's face. He thought about all the weapons pointed at Earth, all the fear and suspicion in the galactic community, all the possibilities for disaster. But he also thought about the proposals Helen had shown him. The genuine desire for peace. The offers of cooperation and friendship. I'm going to do everything I can to make that happen, Alex. I promise you I'll try my best. The boy smiled brightly and ran back to his class. Jake stood and found Helen watching him with an unreadable expression. That's what this is really about, she said quietly. Not military power or political games. It's about children like Alex who deserve a chance to see the galaxy, who deserve to grow up without the shadow of imprisonment hanging over them, who deserve a future that includes more than just this one sealed world. Back on the Valiant, Jake recorded his full report for the Galactic Council. He included everything he had witnessed. The memorial to Earth's dead, the enhanced humans and their abilities, the bargain with the Void Chorus, the military preparations and defensive capabilities, but he also included the proposals for peace, the genuine desire for reconciliation, the hope in a child's eyes. Earth was sealed away because the galaxy feared what humans could become, he said into the recorder. That fear created exactly the threat it sought to prevent. We made them into survivors. We gave them 3,000 years to become unstoppable. Now we have a choice. We can embrace them as family returned from exile, or we can fight them and face the consequences. But if we choose fear again, we'll deserve whatever happens next. He ended the recording and sent it through every priority channel available. Then he stood at the viewport watching Earth rotate slowly in the distance. The barrier continued to decay. In less than 6 months it would fail completely. 6 months to decide the fate of the galaxy. Lisa joined him at the viewport. "What do you think will happen?" she asked softly. Jake didn't have an answer. The Galactic Council would debate and argue. Some would vote for peace. Others would demand that Earth be destroyed before it could threaten anyone. The decision would probably come down to fear versus hope, suspicion versus trust. "I don't know," he admitted finally. "But for the first time in 3,000 years, Earth's fate isn't sealed. It's up to all of us now. Every species, every world, every individual who has to choose between the easy path of fear and the harder path of forgiveness." The Valiant remained on station monitoring the barrier's decay. Reports came in from across the galaxy as Jake's findings spread. Some civilizations began preparing for war. Others started drafting peace treaties. The galaxy held its breath, waiting to see what would happen when humanity's long imprisonment finally ended. Whatever came next would reshape the entire galactic community. Earth had spent 3 millennia becoming something new. Now the galaxy would discover if they could accept what humanity had become, or if fear would doom them all to the very war they were trying to prevent.